Carl Gershman, he was formerly the leader of Social Democrats USA. He was formerly actively involved, a prominent member of the Socialist Party. So these are people who they were trots and SOCDEMs who became not only full-on neocons, but active agents of U.S. imperialism working in the U.S. government. Para que se asustan será para mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando. Viva la revolución.
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
The NED, one of the key arms of the CIA, one of the key arms of U.S. imperialism, it genuinely emerges out of the right wing of the U.S. left. And that's why you mentioned, I mean, this comment that the comrade just said, it's really important to point out that this is still a debate that we need to be having because it's still extremely relevant, not only because the FBI has a long history of, through COINTELPRO, supporting fake left groups and pro-imperialist groups and anti-communist groups, but also specifically because, as you mentioned, I published an article at the Gray Zone about how the so-called Socialism Conference, which was organized by DSA, Haymarket Books, which is the former ISO, and Jacobin Magazine, they invited multiple people who were funded by the NED to speak on panels about why we need to oppose China. This is it. The Socialism 29 Conference. So for people who don't know, the Socialism Conference was the annual conference organized by the ISO, the International Socialist Organization. Though that was a trot group that were the Cliffite trots, formed by Tony Cliff, who was like the center of the trot movement, whereas the right wing of the trot movement were the Shachtmanites, organized by Max Shachtman, and the center of the trots were Tony Cliff's groups, and that became ISO. So the ISO dissolved, and after they dissolved, a lot of their members joined DSA. So DSA now is a mixture of like former ISO trots and like Shachtmanite Social Democrats and Harrington Social Democrats. Most of them are pro-imperialist, but they organized, you can see here, this is a panel they organized at the 2019 Socialism Conference. And you can see Kevin Lynn, he works for a group, the Labor Rights Forum, which is International Labor Rights Forum, which is funded by the NED. If you go down a bit, you can see it's funded by a CIA cutout, the NED. And here's the NED's website. Ronald Reagan is, go up a little bit. Ronald Reagan is on the NED website. And if you see the pink highlighted text I have,
yeah,
they talk about free markets. Like one of the main goals of the NED is supporting free enterprise, free markets.
Wow.
And if you go down, you can see the documents showing that these groups, there it is. China Labor Watch, which is where he works. China Labor Watch is funded by the NED, a CIA cutout, to fund specifically in Hong Kong. China Labor Watch is based in Hong Kong, and they support anti-communist, anti-China labor unions in Hong Kong that were involved in the protests. And you can go down and there's more documents here.
This is
so right
amazing.
Here, the international, right, go up a little bit, right there. The International Labor Rights Forum, which is also another person who attended this conference organized by former ISO people, sponsored by DSA, Jacobin Magazine, and Haymarket Books. They invited multiple people who, not just one, multiple people who work for organizations funded by the NED, a CIA cutout, that were involved in the Hong Kong counterinsurgency, the Hong Kong insurgency, rather, the fake color revolution attempt in Hong Kong. And multiple people work at these groups funded by a CIA cutout to try to destabilize the Chinese government. So it's not just history we're talking about. The DSA has people actively involved in DSA. Go up a little bit. Who are not only funded. Go to the right there. Not only are they funded by the NED, they're funded by the European Union. You can see here, Kevin Lin, who's a very prominent member involved in DSA. He works for this thing. He helps work with Made in China Journal, which is funded by the European Union's so-called innovation program, which is a neoliberal program. So we're talking about the same things we're talking about. Carl Gershman, he was formerly the leader of Social Democrats USA. He was formerly actively involved, a prominent member of the Socialist Party. So these are people who they were trots and SOCDEMs who became not only full-on neocons, but active agents of U.S. imperialism working in the U.S. government.
It's insane because so many people don't know this. Like, if you're new, if you're a young person who's revolutionary, who sees that capitalism is decaying, there's rising unemployment, there's endless war, you look to organizations for support, for guidance, and there isn't really much information about this. And that's why I'm so glad you published that piece and other pieces as well on the site, because it breaks down the financials. You follow the money. And it's funny, me and my girlfriend Ophelia, we always have this joke that whenever we would go to protest, we would try to guess, like, okay, who's on the clock right now and who's really here because they want to be here, you know. And there is this kind of NGO industrial complex, union industrial complex, NED industrial complex that is like controlled opposition. The term that comes to mind for me is astroturfing. AstroTurf is fake grass, and you're creating a fake grassroots campaign where it didn't already exist. And we see that happening in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, in Cuba, all over the world, China, Iran, the color revolutions, and how they create out of thin air these pro-democracy movements.